So good evening, everyone. Welcome to Beneath the Waves, week 4. Myself and Dave were talking that we couldn't believe quite how quickly these weeks are going past. And as we've returned back to school and finished our first week following Easter, we're really excited this week to be moving from the I aspect that we've been focusing on in the first 3 weeks, very much to the we and the collective. And I think that for me as a head is coming through very clearly, that the need to pull your team together and make sure that we're steering on path and towards that North Star, but making sure that we're going at the pace in which we're taking everyone with us very gently and very sensitively at the moment is really key. So well-being is very much taking centre stage at Shaftesbury at least. And we're trying to do that through our whole community. But tonight we're going to be working with Dave and myself on some of those key skills that we really require for true connection. So how do we get a really true we in our groups and in our teams and across our community? So Dave, over to you.
Okay, well, as usual, let me start with a reminder of what we did last week. So we had Dr. Alan Watkins joining us last week, who's the CEO and founder of Complete. And I think we had a fantastic session, both in the first half hour, and then we had a very lively discussion afterwards in the forum.
Yeah, and I put both halves up as well, Dave. I put both on YouTube and included them in the podcast as well. So if anyone wants to revisit that or missed out on last week, do have a look on the YouTube and podcast links.
So we were continuing the journey of how we become more aware of, more literate of, and how we manage our emotions. And Alan talked about two things. The first one, what we call the shift, which is about how you can change your emotional state. So it starts with finding a way to stop what you're doing, shifting your attention to your heart, breathe through the center of your chest, as Katie was just demonstrating how to do fantastically. That takes your attention out of the chatter that normally is going on in your mind. And then the next step is to induce the emotion you want to feel, whether that's courage, confidence, happiness, whatever that emotion is, induce that positive emotion and really feel it in your body. Allow it to, just move in your body and just feel it as strongly as you can. And then turn your brain back on, and you'll find that that whole process has literally shifted you out of the emotional state you were in into the emotional state you want to move in. And what can really help that is mastering as many of the emotions that we want to be able to move into as possible. And mastery is just simply being able to describe the emotion in as much detail as possible. So if you remember, we showed you the chart on the screen, and Alan talked about being able to describe what color is the emotion, what's the shape of it, big, small, etc. What's the temperature? What's the noise? How does it move around the body, and so on. And the more detail you can put around that, the easier it is to be able to induce that emotion when you need it. So those were the two skills we covered last time.
Well, I think it's really important, as I say. I realised I was saying that we're moving on to the we this week, but to remain conscious of the I that we have covered, because essentially if we're not as leaders in that state to support our teams, as Dave's saying, that shifting of state to definitely a positive energy, and depending on the situation, a high or low energy state in where we're trying to be and what kind of energy we're bringing into the room or Zoom call. So it's really important that we're not sort of just disregarding the last 3 weeks, forgetting about them, not rehearsing them and not practicing them, but we're looking at now we're almost in that state. What can we now do collectively? I think, is that right, Dave? Is that how that sort of theme sits with you?
Yeah. We were going to do a poll. I don't know whether you prepared it, Matt, or not.
Yeah. I'll put that up. So the use of the tools. So how have you been using the tools that we have covered? Have they been every day, 2 or 3 times a week, once a week, or never at all? So please feel free to complete the poll as you see fit. So 2 or 3 times a week is definitely coming up as the strongest lead. There's a couple of nevers and a few once a weeks as well. So Dave, prompts wise, can you give us any tips on how we prompt that rehearsal?
Well, look, I think this is great. I think the fact that that the majority are doing it 2 or 3 times a week is great. I think one person doing it every day, which is fantastic, and that's obviously ideal. And I think it's really a case, as with anything, as with going to the gym, as with anything, finding a way to build it into your routine. And treat it like brushing your teeth. I mean, you would no matter how busy you are, I bet all of you brush your teeth twice a day, or have a shower once a day. And so how do you build that in and give it the same level of importance as brushing your teeth and finding that time? So whether you do it first thing in the morning, I like to do something mid-morning and before I go to bed is typically when I do it. And I also do stuff, as I've said to you before certain events. But yeah, I actually think this is a great start. But the more you can practice, the better.
Yeah, we were talking around that idea of essentially how, how can you build it into your day? So for myself, I've been trying to do it when I've been making a cup of coffee. So in the time that it takes me to make a cup of coffee, how can I practice that breathe skill at that as well?
Cool. Okay, well, let me move on then, as Matt said, to talk about the we and how we work with our teams. And obviously at this time, I'm sure most of you were working from home and connecting with your team virtually, or connecting with colleagues virtually. So how do you do that in the most effective way? And we're going to start by talking about what I believe is probably the most fundamental thing in relationships and how we work as a team, which is being able to listen and really hear and really understand each other. And I'm going to show a few charts as well. So I'm going to start with communication, transmission and reception. And actually it's interesting because all of us are actually much better at transmitting than we are at receiving. We're taught from a very early age how to speak, how to articulate, how to pronounce, how to use language. We get lots of correction from our parents, lots of help at school, but actually we get very little training, help in how to receive communication. And many of us, even when we look as though we're listening, are actually spending at least half of our time not listening at all. We might be in a meeting, we might look as though we're listening, but actually our head's a million miles away thinking of something else, or we're thinking about what a load of rubbish that person is saying, and how I'm going to respond to them. Typically, when you hear people saying, yes, 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 they're actually not listening, they're just wanting to jump in and give their own opinion. And I don't know, there's 30 plus of you guys here on the call at the moment. How many of you are doing other things and half listening? How many of you are really listening intently? I don't know. Obviously, I hope all of you are, but difficult to say. But so we're really going to focus this on reception. And if there is one bit that you do really listen to, my advice is the next few minutes, because that's the heart of what we're really going to talk about. So we believe there are 3 levels of listening. The first, level 1, is about the words, the tone, and the body language. And by the way, the words make up about 7% of what we take in when we're listening.
And this is different, Dave. Just to point out that this is different to that common perception that body language is, I think, 72%, I think, is how Daniel Goleman puts it. Just to sort of note that there's that difference in percentage there.
Yeah, there is. I mean, it still says body language is the biggest part, tone makes up about 35%, body language 58%. And this is what most communication skills or listening skills focuses on. I mean, I'm sure many of you practice active listening. It really focuses on trying to hear the words, the tone, the body language. But yeah, at Complete, we believe this is only the first level, and that actually, what we're really trying to get to is a level of listening that goes much deeper than that.
And
And
this
that
is
starts.
this is 25 years of coaching experience, right? So the ultimate listeners.
Yeah, and I have to say, I worked for Unilever for 30 plus years, and I'd actually had lots of training courses on listening and communication and so on. But when
Active.
I worked with Complete and saw this capability, I must admit, I found it to be really incredibly powerful. So level 2 is about what are the conscious thoughts and feelings that are being transmitted, which is behind the words, behind the tone, and behind the body language. And what is the person thinking, and what are they feeling at a conscious level? And then level 3, which is what we're really trying to get to, is what we call the deeper meaning behind what's being communicated. And this can be values, beliefs, and it can be the unconscious thoughts and the unconscious feelings that are happening for the person who's communicating, who's talking. And if you can hear that and play back that deeper meaning, it is incredibly powerful and hugely motivating, because people who, when you do get it and you play it back, and people really go, whoa, this person really gets me. They understand me. They were really listening to me. And you can even get experiences where people feel, wow, you literally read my mind. I mean, the example I like to give is a conversation I had with my daughter about 3 or 4 months ago, before all this COVID stuff. She was working as a digital marketeer, and she wanted to have a conversation about pricing for a new client. So she had a new client who was setting up a startup and wanted her help with digital marketing, everything from the sort of strategy to a plan to then execution of that plan. And my daughter came to me and said, can you help me with, how I should be charging? Should I charge on an hourly basis? Should I charge for a piece of work? Should I charge, for stage 1 initially, then stage 2, then stage 3? Or do I charge, do I give a price for the whole thing? Or do I say, can I have a stake in the business? But actually, what I was sensing as she was talking, I mean, she never said any of this, but what I was sensing and what I then played back to her was that I felt what was behind all of this was that she was actually really, really worried that she was going to charge a whole load of money and this person was not going to be happy with the work. Or actually, what was even behind that was her feeling that she was going to do this work and it wasn't going to be of good enough quality. So it was actually really nothing to do with the price that she was going to charge. It was her feeling of, wow, this is a hell of a big job and really exciting, but her worries about, was she going to be good enough? Was the work going to be good enough? And actually, by hearing that and playing that back to her, it was like, you could see she immediately went, oh, because that's really what the issue was. And then we could have a whole conversation about that and then move back to the pricing and so on. So that, that's just an example of what we're talking about.
And that framework of emotions, Dave, has got to be an enabler in finding some of that meaning. So being able to understand your emotional universe and what the common behaviors and energies that come with that emotions surely has to support in how we really tap.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, everything we do all links together at the end of the day and all supports each other. So let me say a little bit then about how to do this. It also, so we're going to talk about a technique for being able to listen to the deeper meaning behind what people are communicating. And as a, you'll be familiar with this you move attention to your heart. It starts with move attention to your heart, because that gets you out of the chatter, your head, and all the stuff that's going round and round in your head all the time, and takes you away from that. And by moving your attention onto your heart and focusing on the center of your chest and breathing, you get into the right coherent state, and you develop an openness to be able to really hear what's behind what the person is saying. And this might seem really, really weird to you, but a big part of it is about really appreciating the speaker. Find something to appreciate about the transmitter, and no matter who that person is, there'll always be something positive that you can genuinely feel that whatever it is, and radiate it towards the transmitter. Obviously easier if you're face-to-face, more difficult if you're virtual, but it is possible virtually. But really sort of ham it up, and really sort of bathe the speaker in your appreciation. And what that does, it makes the speaker feel appreciated. And you all know how it feels to feel appreciated and genuinely listened to. What happens is you open up more, you give more, you say more than you would have done otherwise, and it really opens up the communication. So the last bit of the map skill is playing back the underlying meaning. So when the person has finished the communication, trying to sense and play back what you've heard, what's the deeper meaning that you've heard. So try and present this as an offer. Don't present it as, oh, what you're trying to say is, or what I heard is, but do it as what I'm sensing is, what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling. And my experience is that 9 times out of 10, that deeper meaning you've heard will really resonate with the person. And that, as I said earlier, is just so powerful. Occasionally, you get it wrong. And that's absolutely fine, because even when you don't get it quite right, what it always does is open up a deeper conversation, because you go, what I'm sensing is, and the person goes, yeah, not quite that, but what, and then you gets you to that deeper level anyhow, even if you haven't quite sensed it absolutely right. So give it a go. It's I have to say, my experience of this is, and all the clients we use it with, this is incredibly powerful and can be really literally game changing.
And what do you think it is that really makes that game change, Dave? What is?
I think it is that, because as human beings, we just being appreciated and being really listened to, you open up and you say more, and more comes out. And then if people connect to that deeper meaning that you haven't even said, it's like, whoa, builds such an emotional connection with the person. And it gets to a discussion that would never, ever have happened. I mean, clients will say, after we've taught this clients and they've used it, and the next time we see them, they'll talk about how they started a conversation with somebody in their team, and actually they sensed very early on that there was something deeper behind what the person was saying, and they play that back to the person, and then the initial conversation is gone, because the much more important conversation is the one they then go on to have. So genuinely, this is game changing, and I've seen enough of my own personal examples and other people's examples to really convince me that this is incredibly powerful.
And I'm assuming the more you practice it, the less frequent, the more frequently you actually use it in your day-to-day conversational chat. In that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more you get, you get in tune of when to use it. When is there something that where this will really add value?
And my experience of that has been actually meeting the complete team. So when I met the whole team, the level of conversation just within 30 seconds of meeting most of the team went to a pretty deep level. And that's not to say that everyone's in search of a deep and meaningful conversation, but the connection with the team was huge. And we've invited in Katie back in, actually, I should say, because Katie very kindly does all of our breathing for us. But we've invited Katie back in to really touch on that breathe aspect of the M in MAP. And she's going to be explaining a little bit around how you can use the breathe to, when you're practicing your breathe, you can build that into your conversation as well. So Katie, did you want to expand on anything there in your own practice? Because obviously we really appreciate your breathe session at the beginning, and that's the first step of MAP. So where do you take us from there?
Yeah, I think it's trying to, we have this, and you've described it really well, this sort of mass of just being able to communicate a whole load of words and a whole load of blurb. But actually what you're trying to do is really appreciate the speaker. So not jump in, just actually almost say to somebody like, Matt, download what you're worried about, download the issue here to me, and I'm just gonna take it all in, right? And as you're doing that, allowing somebody to download, sending out appreciation for that other person. And then when they stop talking, I know people say, well, if I do that, they're not going to stop talking. He or she just keeps going. That's fine. At some point, they will stop. And then you play it back. What I get the sense of, this is what I've heard. So Matt, I kind of get the sense that something's not going right with the webinar at the moment. And Dave's, it doesn't take a genius to work that out. But it's almost like that sense of, what's happening on the inside. And, in a sense, being able to, this is what I sense is going on. This is a challenge to your coherence. Actually breathe. We may or may not get Dave back again. It's fine either way. Actually, let's breathe through it and give that appreciation. But the playback for meaning is that sense of, it's almost reading, it feels like it's reading people's minds. I kind of get the sense that you're happy with this, or you're not happy. I kind of get the sense that this is okay. This is all right, this situation, right? But the killer point in that is, am I right? So it might be feeding back, and you might say, to take Dave's example, I kind of get the sense that you're a bit nervous about asking for that amount of money. Sometimes it's the fear of your work being rejected, right? So it might be, I kind of get the sense that you feel that your work might be rejected, and that could be a problem. Is that right? That's the key question here. Because if you say yes, then it's just like a stake in the ground. We've got a mutual stake in the ground, right? So we agreed on something. And actually, we've come to probably what is quite a big realization for many people. If you say no, Matt, it might be, okay, well, give me a little bit more, download a little bit more about that. What bit did I get right? What bit didn't I get right? So what we're looking for is incredible clarity and agreement.
And I think what you're saying there with that agreement is something that, when I've come to speak with people that actually I don't know or are not on my team, I'm still finding that when I really choose to consciously, and I do have to do it consciously, not saying that I'm a terrible listener without, but when I do that consciously, it really allows me to connect much more quickly with the person, and I think establish trust much more quickly, because they almost get that you're authentic. There's not sort of, you're not trying to slide in a comment here or there or get them looking at your agenda as opposed to their own. So I found that trust connection has really come through. Is that something you'd agree with, Katie?
Yeah, I think it's part of where we develop people as well, is, and I think with being virtual at the moment, so most people's communication is virtual, and it's difficult when things, when technology goes wrong or whatever, we're floating elsewhere, a bit like you are now, Matt,
Yeah.
And that sense of, actually, is he here? Is he with me?
Are we right in the room?
And it can be, yeah, exactly. So you're here, you're in front of the screen, but you're also concerned about what else is going on in the moment. So that sense of, kind of, as a listener, as a receiver, it's understanding that and saying, actually, cut this guy a bit of slack here. This is not an easy situation, right? send him appreciation, send him a bit of compassion, and roll with it and do what you can to help. And that, I think, is just called being human.
I mean, a practical example is I have an SLT meeting tomorrow. We're all going to be digital. We've got 12, 14 people on that team. How do I connect with everyone in that virtual world so that everyone feels heard? And just after that, we're gonna move on to the Q&A. So I've seen a couple of Qs down there now, but just to sort of give you that heads up that if you want to add a couple more questions, if you've got any, then please do at this point. But Katie, how do we get everyone to feel that we're part of that? How do we bring everyone around the table when there's no table to come round?
Well, I think there is a table, you know. I think, you know, we're a wonderful aspect of being human is we have this wonderful thing called visualization, and we can utilize those skills around the virtual table. And I think that sense of, can you make it warm? Can you make it inviting? Can you make it exciting? And it might be that sense of, you know, you set some parameters. So if you've got, how many people did you say in the meeting tomorrow?
About 14. Yeah.
Okay, 14. So that shows I wasn't listening, doesn't it? I had 13 in my mind. So, right, so 14 people. So you might want to start just very, very quickly, you know, asking them, you know, how, you know, or something about their week. Or you might even just want to go around and ask them how they're feeling at the moment, almost like 3 words or 3 sentences that sort of express how they're feeling. Something really quick, because that's a lot of people there. But how you hold that space, how safe it feels, how safe I feel with you matters greatly, because it will determine how you show up, will determine how I show up. That's the long and the short of it.
And that's
so if I feel safe with you, I'll tell you anything. If I don't, I'll just hide in my corner.
So Dave, is there any sort of final tips just before we move on to Q&A that you wanted to really share? So we finished off MAP, and we've just been talking around how we can do that virtually. So is there anything that you particularly wanted to share that you had planned for tonight's session?
My only comment would be, give it a go. Yeah. And it might feel a bit weird and unnatural. Give it a go with somebody who you feel very safe doing it with. So you could even try it at home. You know, this is just as useful with a family member as it is in a work context. You know, my wife often accuses me of not listening. There's a time when I just switch off, and so use it at home and try it, and tell people you're trying something new, and just give it a go. And like all the things we do, practice, practice, practice. Matt, have you spoken about how, you know, the things you did at school? Because I think that was fantastic, and what you're doing now. Yeah. But I think that's all I would say. Just give it a go, try it, practice.
So Rebecca's asked, the secondary school is full of transitions between class, or in fact in any school. With large classes, this doesn't lend itself to staff being able to really listen to their students. So we're not talking necessarily in the leadership team here, but well, I mean, I suppose leadership's are students as well. And so there's not enough time for level 3. Staff want to really listen, but school is often just a bit of a big rush. Rarely can time be devoted for this vital skill. The emphasis on learning for exams does not help. Any advice on that one?
Yeah, look, I get that challenge. I would say, so firstly, when we do this with clients, what we do is we practice, and when we practice, we allow a minute for transmission, and then half a minute for the playback. And you'd think, oh, a minute and a half, what can you do in a minute and a half? But actually, it's incredible how deep you can get to within just a minute and a half or 2 minutes. And I'm sure, because, you know, I'm sure there are times when you might be in a big class of 30, but there'll be times when you're sensing that one particular child, there's something going on that, you know, they're not telling you, or there's something behind how they're behaving or what they're communicating. And if you can just find that couple of minutes to have you know, that deeper conversation with that one person, and they feel you connecting with them and you understanding them, you know, that's so powerful. So you don't have to be doing it all, you can't do it all the time, but you know, just those antennae that we all have that are sensing where people are at, and you'll get a feel. And again, the more you practice it, the better you'll get at doing this, of picking up what are the crucial times when actually this will really help break through you know, a situation and unlock something that needs to be unlocked.
Okay, so we're going to move to our open forum after we close out tonight's show, but it's a special thank you to Katie this evening. Katie Ledger stepped in at the last minute, so I'll say last minute, 15 minutes in, and been a wonderful support. So thank you very much to you, and thank you as always to yourself, Dave.
Yeah, no, thank you, Katie. I came back in and saw you there and thought, oh, thank goodness for that.
So as we will move on to those other questions, so George and Deborah have set questions as well, and we'll move those on. But just to say, do remember that your team very much need you as a leader, whether that's leaders above you or those below you on the hierarchy. I know that when my team really listens to me as a leader, that's equally as valuable as when I listen to them. So do sort of consider your role and who it is that you're talking to and who really needs to be heard right now. So thank you very much for tuning in this week, and we shall be back next week on Beneath the Waves.